2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to 20th Century Geek Bite Size. We are back, and Julian and I are going to be pitching again. That's right, we are those dirty mother pitchers, and we have got some more stuff for you today. So, in the last couple episode, we pitched a Green Lantern movie, but now we're going to be pitching something, taking a standard character and taking them out of their usual genre. But first and foremost, Julian, how are you doing? You good?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I'm enjoying this. These pictures and things have been interesting.
Yeah, we definitely have to think on our feet, and you and I have trouble keeping to half an hour, so it's like gotta be wham bam. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes. So some of these have I will admit, have been like you say, a challenge to try and keep to the time, but we will keep to time on these as much as possible. So I'll tell you what, you went first with your the Green Lantern pitch, so I'm going to jump in with the first one for this, if you don't mind. And so I had to real sort of wrap my brain for this one, because I think some characters have done all kinds of different things and have been all over, and lots of things have been done with it. And I thought, could I do a standard character like Superman or Batman or whatever? And I thought, no. I want to do a character that sort of definitely hasn't been used in other genres. So I went with Captain America. And Captain America, I think, has only ever really been used as sort of like an action-adventure kind of, and a spy character. Not really done anything outside of that genre at all. Unless it's been in like an Avengers story, really. So I also there's an episode of the X-Files called Sleep, and it's got a character in it who during I think it's supposed to be the Vietnam War, had some testing and medical stuff done on him, which means he no longer has to sleep, and he is haunted by the apparitions of all the people that he killed during his time in the war. And I was like, that, to me, is the story I want to tell. So I wanted to put Captain America into a supernatural horror. And I wanted him to have to face up to, like, I know he's supposed to be the sword and shield and all this other stuff, but, and with Bucky as well, like Bucky, and they always talk about Bucky and Black Widows and the Winter Soldier and Black Widow and their Red Ledger and all the people they've killed. Let's not kid ourselves, right? Captain America was in the Second World War for a number of years, and I'm pretty sure that he would have had to do some, get down and dirty to save people's lives, or even for own purposes to win the war. Like, he would have done things. And I really like the idea of him, for whatever reason, having to go back to, say, Europe, going back to the battlefields of France, and having to face up to the literal ghosts of the people that he killed and failed to save, and being like literally haunted by these apparitions, and really going for some gothic horror art style. Like, get him, forget all the bright blue or red, white and blue, and all that kind of stuff. Like, I want to get this dark and have it, in my head, him visiting like a farm village that 70, 80 years ago, was the source of a battle. And it's still a farm village because, parts of Europe are very much like that. And it just being grey and drab. But they're like, no, we have a graveyard out there with just rocks on because we don't know who these people were. And just, these apparitions coming up and literally him having to face it off against these ghosts. What do you think?
So what is I like it. I like Captain America. I mean, I think he's a lot more versatile, as you suggest, than, I've always thought of Captain America as sort of like a missed opportunity to do sort of stories that are more war stories, more about sort of like PTSD. I mean, they've had like stories where he fights the government, I mean, there's the Richard Nixon stuff. But about the supernatural stuff, is something triggering these ghosts? I mean, I love that this X-Files episode that you cite, and connecting these two is very smart. So is there an amulet? I mean, what's causing these ghosts to come up? Or is it just that they're ghosts in this universe?
I just think there's just ghosts in this universe. Like, he's got to put them to rest. but I think it would be that thing of coming to terms with something that he's never had to face up to. Like, one of the things I would like to sort of, if we were going to do this story, would be, I mean, with Cap, you say, they've always sort of kept him in that sort of like action. They've done the war stories and this other stuff. I mean, they've even sort of faced up to, the secret past of Captain America, like, or at least the super soldier serum. They had the first Captain America, or the first Captain was really a black. Captain
the Truth.
Yeah, the Truth.
Great series.
Yeah, great series. But there's never really, whenever they've done the war flashbacks, apart from maybe like when they did the Winter Soldier stuff again, we talked about a couple episodes ago, the Brubaker stuff and some of the stuff with Winter Soldier, they've gone into the fact that this was basically a 16-year-old kid that they used because he was smaller to go in and kill people. Like, but that to me, like, if Cap's letting that happen, like, I'm like, that's not good. Like, there's something, like, it's war. Well, yeah, fine, but I almost want it to be, there's something, like, if it was to be the last survivor of World War II, some of those guys, he landed with Normandy, are dying off. They're all going. And the last one, he goes to see one of the last guys, and they just say to him, like, you've got to acknowledge, I don't know, whatever the name of the French village would be. And just people are like, what's he talking about, Cap? Like, what's this? Mm-hmm. And, like, the more he looked into it, the more like, this village reports, like, all kinds of different things. Like, it's never survived. The crops always fail. There's always this. There's always that. And Cap just goes to visit it, and all of a sudden it just kicks off. Like it would in an X-Files or Ghostbusters or something. And it's all of a sudden this thing of like, this would the acknowledgement that although he was a symbol, although he was supposed to be the patriot, and they had all these propaganda photos and the reels of him, the newsreels of him stood astride a destroyed Panzer tank, sort of standing proud, all these other soldiers. The fact is that what they're not showing is behind that Panzer tank are a bunch of Nazi soldiers and villagers that got blown to pieces in this battle, and he was a part of that. And he is the thing is, like, as all these people die off, the only person that carries the sort of like the singular sort of guilt and ownership for these is Captain America. Like, it was distributed across all these people. It was war, but now it's sort of focusing in on Cap because he's the only survivor to ever sort of come out of this. And so he has to return, and like, he has to turn around to the people that know him, and he has to say, no, I did some shit in that war. Like, there's a reason I can use this accurately as a frisbee. Like, I was taking off heads, I was doing all kinds of things. Like, and I would like to see that as these apparitions sort of like really facing up to him. But like, the responsibility of like for 70 plus years, this part of Europe has been drenched in this inability to move forward because of these events. And he's the only one really that can purge it by acknowledging that this stuff that we were both sides, we were the greatest generation, but let's not kid ourselves. We did, it's not, Vietnam wasn't the first war where we did some pretty nasty things. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I want to ask about the supernatural element, but I do want to applaud exactly that theme and say that, everyone who I've ever talked to who was in World War II, including relatives in my family, basically was like, there was no glory there. I mean, we did a good thing, right? But the day-to-day life, there was no, I mean, it was war as hell. And, we saw a lot of messed up stuff. And, was I glad to kill Nazis? Sure. But I was mostly glad it wasn't me that was dead. Yeah. And that's really was their experience more than anything. So about the supernatural element, I think you said, like, really play that up. And I think that's the right instinct, like, don't have it be, I love the themes that you're getting at, but I think the instinct of, like, don't have it be like a sort of grace notes in the plot, but really play that up, go full force, and have this be a full force Captain America supernatural story of, like, he goes into that, like, French village or whatever, and it's just like, there are spirits, there's hauntings, stuff's moving in the night, would you go like full, like, Ghostbusters versus like real horror? Where would you find that tone?
Have you seen Crimson Tide?
Yes.
Crimson Peak, sorry, the Guillermo del Toro. There's a scene in that where Amanda, what's her face, Sonnenfeld, whatever it is. She's at the thing, and the spirit of her mum comes back. And the way that Guillermo del Toro depicts them, like it sort of like it almost like pulls itself out of the floor, and it's not like this jitter. I hate these like jittering ghosts that sort of move. Oh
yeah,
that bothers me. I mean, it's fine, but this thing's like spiritual. It's got like I mean, it's all practical as well, but it's almost got like a shroud of smoke and shadow around it. But this sort of red, deteriorating face in the middle. You know, and it's an apparition that's, you know, it represents her guilt or her sorrow. That's how I'd see them. Like, it would start, as you say, like if you were to do this as a horror comic, it would start with the little things, like, you know, it'd start with him having to visit, and it'd be the smaller things, like he would talk to someone, asking for directions. You'd see them there, you turn back, and then they're gone, and you know, those little things. And seeing, I think the thing is this would all come down to a single experience. He would keep seeing a single figure, and whether it be, I don't want it to be the trope of a little girl, but like a single figure. And I would like it to probably, actually, in fact, it would be a Nazi officer, and he would keep seeing this Nazi officer in the field or on a bridge or in a window or something. And then, like you say, little things would happen. Like, you know, it could be as daft as like his shield is moved when he's, you know, he woke up and it's on the chair. The next morning it's on the shelf and that sort of thing. Silly little things. Then it would escalate. And then in the shadows of things, you know, he would see a shadow, and just the part of a shadow looks like the silhouette of something else. But when he gets there, there's nothing there. I want to sort of tap into like the M.R. James or those sort of, like, you know, gothic horror, sort of like, you know, late Victorian, early 20th century kind of horror stories, and just have it constantly build up. Like, there's no adventure in this story. There's no, and the problem for Cap is there's no one to punch.
Right.
You know,
that's good. Right.
That's the thing. Like, he keeps, you know, there's the frustration and the build up and this thing. Like, there's no one for him to punch. There's no one to throw his shield at. And eventually, I think the reveal would be, at the end of all this figure that he keeps seeing is, as you say, is that there was a situation where he was pinned down in some way. Like, yeah, he's super strong and all this other stuff, but he was pinned down, and the only way for him to survive was to kill someone up close and personal. Mm-hmm. You know, he bayoneted this guy to death, like, you know, and he didn't do it to save a village. He didn't do it to save a young, you know, French girl or whatever. He literally did it to survive in a moment of desperation. He's human. Like, he's not, you know, he's still human at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And you know, you realize that this is the guilt, that actually this is the one killing that he can't justify in all of the war. And so it's been hanging over him, and that's what he's got to face up to, this thing. And, like, you know, that's what this figure is. It sort of represents this guilt of all of these acts throughout the war. And I'm not sure how the resolution would be, because, you know, I don't want it to be like Poltergeist or anything like that. Like, you know, part of it may be that even that it's something like, you know, you're going to come to terms with this, but you're still going to see this thing. Like, the resolution is just going to have to be him acknowledging this. But I want it to be like, he has to acknowledge this, or this darkness in this village is just going to keep growing, and that the people in the village are becoming, you know, encompassed within this kind of thing, within the legacy of these events.
There could be, like, you know, strange deaths, like a guy drove off the road because he saw something, and, you know, like, it's not just like crops have failed, and you know, I mean, it could be like sort of a kind of escalation there. I think having those themes of guilt and having those themes of the legacy of violence feel as if they've played out successfully. If that lands, this is an amazing, awesome story. You know, if you can get that to really feel, you got to really feel that.
That's the point of this. Like, the ghosts have got to represent something. I want it to be a full-on supernatural horror story, but I don't want it to just be ghosts for ghost's sake. They've got to be, you know, they've got to represent something, especially if you're using Captain America, and, you know, in that way. So that's mine. That's my pitch of taking a character out of his norm. And the more I've talked about it, the more I want to see it now, actually. So throwing it out. Me too. Yeah. So, okay then, Julian, what have you got for us?
Well, I really struggled with this one, you know, and I thought about, you know, I'm a big Adam Strange fan, and, you know, I thought about, like, Adam Strange detective stories, and I thought about, like, Martian Manhunter detective story, like that American Secrets miniseries and stuff, and all those like Marvel Noir series, and I thought, yeah, what is it that I really like? What is it that I really would like to write or to see? And I came back to history, and it occurred to me what I'd really love to see is, and I sort of have two versions of this. The first one is like, say, a 12-issue comic series where starring Wonder Woman, who is in some versions, immortal. Paradise Island's kind of skipping through time. It's been around a long time. And it's sort of written as sort of every issue is Wonder Woman in, Greek times and Periclean Athens. Maybe she leaves the island every once in a while to sort of see if they're ready for, man's world is ready for their truth or what's going on. And so, you'd go from sort of, the ancient Greeks, you'd have like a Roman chapter, you'd have, and you'd get all the way through like Victorian, England, and, you'd be able to tell all these stories, and they could be quiet stories. I'm thinking about like, sort of Sandman and the Roman story in Sandman, where, yeah, she's got her superpowers, but they're almost never used. It's really just a quiet story of sort of watching humanity evolve and watching man's world evolve and how she appreciates certain changes, and certain things and doesn't, others. Maybe she sees, repression of women in the Middle Ages and, says, oh, well, they've gone back. They think they're better because they believe in this Christian God. We're still worshiping the old gods. And, how does she react to that span of history in just these quiet chapters? So that was sort of my idea. And then I thought, so version 2 is, I'd like to see that. But version 2 is, might be a little more commercial, which is it's the same sort of idea, 12-issue series with the history, but I think that the Superman origin story is for shit. It's a cool idea, but come on, these aliens look just like us. Kryptonians are like, oh, they look like white people. White, they landed in a white territory, right? Obviously, that's a lie, right? So, this idea would be sort of thinking about like Superman Red Son, one of my favorite stories. Imagine if instead Superman landed in a different time. And then imagine if simultaneously, what I've always thought is, he's not really the son of Jor-El. Okay, he's a clone. The ship made him. So like the ship is making. There are different incarnations, different landings, different attempts to, seed humanity with the Kryptonian or whatever. And so again, you sort of have like, they did this a little bit with like, the Kents, where you're like telling a West story with the Kents. But this would be like sort of Superman Red Son, except what does a Superman in Roman times look like? What does a Superman in, Greece? What does this medieval Superman look like? And just have each of these incarnations and what their powers would be interpreted in different ways, right? Well, the Greek gods blessed him, well, this is a miracle, or he's possessed by Satan, And so, again, just sort of quiet. There'd be maybe more superpowers in this than the Wonder Woman version, but again, not consequential, doesn't change history, and really sort of explores how this alien would be perceived, or these different aliens, the string of aliens would be perceived in different times. So 2 different kind of slightly different versions on the same idea.
I like the idea that the Wonder Woman one, if as she grows up, like, because obviously you could age her up throughout the different eras, being sent out into the world is a learning lesson, but saying, part of it is like, if you want to return to Themyscira, you cannot, the moment you utilize the gifts you have is the moment that the shutters come down and you cannot get back to Themyscira. So that sort of like, I'd like to have that as the limiter. Like, yeah, she sees these injustices, but she's like, oh, but I want to go home. Like, the world is not, I'm not ready to go out into the world yet. So interfering, but not, bashing out the lasso or sort of crashing through things to get it done. I think that'd be really cool. I mean, especially sort of like you say, seeing almost like the progression of women through like ancient Greek and all those other times to then go to sort of like at some point medieval Europe, or even later to sort of like if you had sort of her traveling the world and she ends up in Salem in the sort of 1600s, and you're like, she's like, I'm seeing these women burnt as witches, and I can't really do anything about it, but I can try and intercede a little. Yeah, no, I'd like the idea of that, especially like say if you put the limiter on it, it's like she can't bash out the armor and all that kind of stuff and interfere. That would be really interesting. The one thing I'd say is I like that because she is immortal and she can do that, and it could have that thing of like each one could be a lesson as well, like a life lesson that you could probably parallel with modern day Wonder Woman of like how those have influenced her and decisions she's made. With the Superman one, I also say, go on.
I was just going to say every episode of the Wonder Woman ends with the last page is Gal Gadot in Paris, remembering it.
Yeah, just sat there going, one day this will become important for a storyline. The Superman one, would they all be, because obviously Superman is tantamount to immortal, being powered by the sun and that sort of thing. So would you end up with like an accumulation of secret Supermen on Earth?
Yeah, I mean, that would be my idea is that it's not really the same Superman. It's kind of like, I don't know how long Superman lives, but like ideally my version of it would be like Superman in the present is like, oh, I wasn't the first, everything I know is wrong. There are these other guys who are just like, oh, now this is the first one who lives in multimedia age in which this is actually going to be reported around the world and not just seen as like, oh, some tribes people claim that, now there's documentary proof. And that's the only thing that differentiates the Superman from these other ones, which, any version of my Superman is always a guy who finds out everything I know is wrong. And, Jor-El was the bad guy, obviously, to me.
Yeah. What would be the resolution to that then? What's the final issue?
Well, I mean, the final issue could be present day,
Yeah.
But it could just be a lark. I mean, it doesn't, I'm not sure DC would be like, yeah, sure, screw Superman's origins. It could just be, like a series of kind of fantasy Elseworlds things of sort of like, what would a Greek Superman be like? Well, there's Hercules, right? I mean, it comes from these things. And I don't think that we've seen that, at least not done in a way where those episodes are not just kind of like dumb superhero stories, but are really, grounded in history and grounded in an understanding of how, we evolved. I mean, you could have like, and I want like a Chinese Superman, right? And the idea is also that like these clones coming out of these ships or whatever, they look like where you land, right? That's why it's a white guy in Kansas, right? So you've got like, a Chinese Superman who's, in the 1400s at the height of, Chinese power. And, they've got printing technology, they've got, gunpowder, they're doing great. And it would be cool to have, like we were talking about Miles Morales, in the first episode of DC versus Marvel. I think it'd be cool in terms of inclusivity to have a Chinese Superman, to have an Asian Superman, to have these kinds of characters.
You could, like I say, it does really open up the whole of history and all kinds of cultures. Because again, you get those cultural differences as well as those historical differences. So, like, how would they be depicted in, like you say, ancient China? Would they see him as a god or as a witch, or compared to say 17th century France, where I really like the idea of that as well, because again, it's sort of like the whole thing of Superman is that he became Superman because of the Kents. They were the ones that they drove his morality. And then, well, if he grows up in these different eras, well, does that morality stand? Morality has changed throughout history. So, you could show him doing things that were considered good and right of that era. But nowadays, readers would be a bit like, well, I'm not sure I feel comfortable with Superman doing these things.
Sure. And I like that dislocation. I mean, I'm a big fan of not just with like aliens having different morality, but also that kind of, they did it on Battlestar Galactica a bit. That's sort of like, yeah, this is a different culture. You should not always approve of what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's true of history. And not just ancient history, but more recent history. Like you can go back and you can, the last sort of 400 years. And, you go back and let's talk about slavery or the treatment of women or poor people or whatever. Like, they were less liberal in them days.
Those days back then. Yeah. But I mean, we mentioned, I was, even people in the 20th century. I mean, people who were progressive were not necessarily progressive on all issues. I mean, people who campaigning for workers' rights were not down with black rights, and vice versa. So.
Yeah, and none of them were down with women's rights because they're all white blokes.
Well, and the suffragette movement was split, but was not a progressive movement when it came to black rights in the United States. Not to mention Native Americans. What's a Native American Superman? I want that. Like, that's an amazing issue,
Yes. Yeah. No, I really like the idea of that. The diversity and the ability to sort of throw in loads of different things in there would be really fascinating. I also like going back to the Wonder Woman one, the idea of her being limited and, because again, you put that morality on her, the fact that like she is letting certain things happen because she wants to go home at that point, because she's not ready to go into the world. I think we put a bit of a different side on that character as well.
Well, I think with that one, like if it is, assuming it is the same Wonder Woman, which I do, we're always shown her emerging in the present day, and she's like, "Oh, they're treating women so terribly," and it's like, yeah, you're lucky you weren't around, 400 years ago to see what we were doing back then.
Yeah.
So she'd be less shocked in the present, and it's more, understanding that history, I think would be fascinating, and also in that case, she is one of my problems with Wonder Woman is I like when she is herself alien, that she is from a Greco-Roman culture. I mean, she does not have the same morality that we do, and in some ways, she's going to be closer to the Greeks and watching all this stuff evolve and be like, yeah, I mean, I'm glad for these changes, but there's this other stuff like I don't understand. What are they doing? Anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like the introduction of technology and transport, and there'll be all kinds of things. Yeah. Excellent.
Good ideas.
Yeah, there you go. 2 more pitches that we have thrown out. A haunted Captain America and Superman and Wonder Woman through the ages.
You're welcome, Marvel and DC.
That's it, yeah. We're giving those away free. And the reason I'm giving them away free is because I want to see them both. And I don't think me writing them will get them made at either company. So, but ladies and gentlemen, as always, we are throwing these out for you to sort of discuss and debate. But in the comments below, let us know what you think of what we've said. But also, what are your ideas? What characters would you take out of their usual genre and put somewhere else? And what would you do with them? Let us know. We'll be fascinated to find out. But as always, thank you, Julian. And we'll see you all on the next episode.